Election day is still a couple of months away, but if a new Boston Globe Suffolk University poll is any indication, the next mayor of Boston will be a woman of color, breaking the city's nearly 200-year record of all-white male chief executives. In the poll, 70% said they supported one of these women, with City Councilor Michelle Wu and Acting Mayor Kim Janey leading the pack, both the first choice for more than 1/5 of likely voters. The poll also dives into issues of race and police brutality, and a former Mayor Walsh is still popular after the police commissioner debacle. The man behind the numbers, director of the Suffolk University Political Research Center, David Paleologos, joins me. David, it's great to see you as always.
Thanks for having me.
Why are Wu and Janey leading the pack?
Because they are winning their core constituencies big, and where they're losing, they're competitive. The third and fourth place candidates, George and Campbell, you know, they have a core constituency where they're winning big, but where they're losing big, and that's the difference.
70% of the vote, as I mentioned a minute ago, captured, at least in your poll, by those four women. I'm going to ask you in a few minutes about how movable these numbers are, but that's a huge number. Does that mean a woman is the next mayor of the city of Boston in your estimation?
Polls are a snapshot in time, but this poll strongly suggests that you never say nothing is 100% certain, but I look at these numbers, and I've looked at the crosstabs for a long time. You know, if you're one of the guys and you're in mid-single digits, you have to vault so many qualified women just to get to the top two. It's going to be a real slog.
It's really sad after 200 years there may not be a guy as mayor. I mean, it's really unfair, don't you think? In any case, let's keep moving for a second here. Another poll, as I'm sure you've seen, has Asabi George atop the pack. How do you explain the disparity?
Well, I think we're using a tight screen, and we think the tight screen is the way to go, which means respondents have to be very or somewhat likely to vote, and respondents have to name the month of the preliminary. Now, believe it or not, over half of the respondents could not name the month of the preliminary who were registered voters.
I'm not surprised.
So they didn't get through the screen. However, other polling might be a little bit more, I won't say lax, but more with more of an open, screen process, allowing more people in who may not vote in September.
You asked people what the most important issue was that will affect your vote for mayor. Well, housing was number one. There was a virtual tie. Housing, racism and justice equality, schools and education, all virtually in the same boat. So when there's that kind of clumping together, what's the takeaway?
That if you're a serious candidate for mayor, you've got to have great policies for each of these three items, and you don't have that currently right now in the top four. Education bubbling up to the third place and being within the statistical margin of error speaks strongly about how dire the issue of education is in Boston. Racism, justice, equality is not surprising for an urban center like Boston, and housing obviously is the number one issue, and I think that's what most of the candidates have been talking about.
You know, if I was a pollster and I saw a number like the next one, I would say, let me double check this, like I'm sure you do. I am stunned by this next number. Would you say race relations between white and black residents in Boston are very or somewhat good, very or somewhat bad? Asian residents of Boston are outliers. If you take away Asians, and I think that's understandable considering the recent Asian hate crimes, not just in Atlanta, but here, black, white, and Hispanic, exactly the same view of how race relations between whites and blacks are. Is that not shocking to you as well?
It's surprising that this question didn't cut on race, but this was really a question that somewhat was the winner on both good and bad. It was a somewhat kind of a response, which is, lukewarm. It's not hot, not cold, but you're right. Asian Americans, for good reason, responded the way they did in the survey.
But black and white exactly the same, 54 to 39, 54 to 41. You also asked a couple of companion questions. How important is it to you that Boston elects a black mayor, another person of color? 2 to 1, 64 to 34. How important is it to you that Boston elects a woman for mayor, 65 to 34? Does that tell us something, or is it just a reflection of what the profile of the candidates are?
I think it reflects exactly who's winning. In the top four, you've got 8 candidates. The top 4 are exactly what that poll question says. And I think to sort of broad brush and generalize where is the white vote in Boston going to go, very, very dangerous way to think about it, because 65% of white people are basically saying they would like to see a person of color.
And what do you attribute that to?
I think because you're center left in Boston, most people are identifying as liberal or very liberal. And so in that capacity, you've got a lot of people who believe it is time. You know, you and I have lived through Kevin White and Ray Flynn and Menino, or Mayor Menino and Mayor Walsh. You know, we've been conditioned to seeing these same white men winning. That's why I think this poll is amazing, and this poll finding is a huge finding.
I wasn't even born when Kevin White was mayor, but that's okay.
Oh, come on.
You know, another surprise. I don't know if it's surprising or not. The most favorable, unfavorable split is not one of the candidates running, is the prior guy, Marty Walsh. 68% favorable, 22% unfavorable. We've been treated to virtually nonstop coverage of the debacle over his selection of Dennis White to be the police commissioner, who lasted 2 days. We know what happened after that. Does that mean, or do you know, that they love Marty Walsh regardless of what he does, or they don't give a damn about what they've been reading about in terms of the commissioner issue?
If he was currently the mayor, I would suspect those numbers would be a little bit different, but this is kind of a fond farewell poll for him. You know, now that he has new digs. Plus, I think, you know, people's attention spans now, with the last 2 weeks, people want to be out of the house. They're not tuned into politics. I don't think anything dramatic is going to happen in July. And so those stories may not have resonated as they would have right before the September election.
Speaking of the summer, the first question I asked you, you did as any responsible pollster does. It's a snapshot in time now. How much room is there for these numbers to change, not just a little, but dramatically between now and mid-September and the runoff?
So I think of the 3rd and 4th place finishers when you ask the question. So if you're Anissa Essayah-George, I think if crime becomes a major issue, her numbers will go up. And I hope there aren't any shootings in Boston. But if the issue of crime jumps from 5th most important to 1st, her numbers will jump up as well correspondingly. That could make this a closer race. Andrea Campbell, on the other hand, is poised better than George to take over one of the top 2 spots, because what we found in the crosstabs is that if Kim Janey drops, much of her black support would rotate to Campbell. And if Michelle Wu drops, guess who Michelle Wu's second most favorite politician is in this race? Andrea Campbell. Andrea Campbell. So Campbell would benefit with either Wu or Janey dropping. So they're still potentially have the possibility of being bunched up.
Keep asking the questions, and we'll keep inviting you back. David Paleologos, good to see you.
Thank you.